There are two sides to photography, science and art. Science part of photography is like learning the camera settings, exposure triangle, and how to use different accessories like filters, how the light works, and stuff like that. The art part of photography, however, is more about how you put the stuff and arrange elements in your photo, in your images, and how you compose the image. So composition is part of the art of the photography. The science part, it's the easiest part, and you can learn it and master the science of photography, but you need to master the art of photography as well. To be able to be a good photographer, you need to improve how you see the scene. You need to train your eyes to learn how to see and find elements, subjects in the landscape, especially in landscape photography. Sometimes it's harder in landscape to compose an image based on what we are going to talk in this video. My goal with this video is to help you improve your eyes and how you see the scene and how you can find elements, stuff in the landscape, in bigger landscapes and smaller landscapes, and take nicer pictures even when the light and conditions are not great. When you don't have great light, when you don't have good atmosphere, you probably will be able to find and take nice pictures. By the end of this video, you will develop your photographic eyes. So please give yourself and myself a favor and watch till the end of the video. It will help me and encourage me to make more videos. Also, it will help the YouTube algorithm to push this video to other photographers, and they also get benefits of watching this video. Let's get into the art of photography, especially for nature and landscape. Hello everyone, my name is Hamed Bank. I'm a visual effects artist and landscape photographer based in Sweden. In this video we are going to talk about shapes and forms in landscape, in photographs, and why this is very important and why you need to look for those shapes and forms to be able to create compelling images. In my opinion, there are two ways to shoot a scene. You may go for the feelings and the mood, or you may go for composition, elements, and the shapes and forms in the photo. Both ways are equally important. You need to learn both, but in this video we are focusing on finding shapes and forms in landscape. And why this is important? Because this is how our brain works. Our brains likes to simplify, make order in complex scenes. And this is something that has been proved by science. For instance, Gestalt principles such as proximity, similarity, continuity, closure, and figure ground describe how our brain likes to familiarize, combine, and make simpler things rather than analyzing everything separately. For example, we see a circle made of dots rather than just seeing scattered dots. Also, neuroscience studies show how our brain likes to simplify complex scenes. Let me start with some examples. I will show you 3 images and I will ask you what you see in these images. Then we will go look at many pictures, many examples, and I will explain what is there, what I was thinking about when I took these images, and then at the end we'll come back to these 3 images and analyze them again together. I will use my own pictures as examples in this video, but you can analyze your own photos, try to find shapes, maybe you have missed them, or you can analyze your favorite photographers' works on social media and on the internet. But let's start with these ones. Have a look at these images and tell me what you see. Okay, let's start with the smaller scenes. It's easier when you look closer, when you zoom in to find the smaller scenes in landscape and big landscapes and try to find order and shapes to take picture of. So we're gonna start with the close-ups, with the intimate scenes. This is the first image we are going to look at. This is refrozen melted snow. I found this scene in the forest in winter, of course. I found the shapes in this piece of ice very fascinating. Also, I took this image. This is the same scene, a little bit zoomed in. And in the edit stage, I tried to increase the contrast and adds more saturation to the colors. Because they are abstract images, I allowed myself to work a little bit more on the editing. And because these images are abstract, you can interpret them to anything. It could be a galaxy, nebula, or anything like that. And here I can find a creature in this image. When I took the image, I didn't see that. When I edited afterwards, I recognized the shape. Sometimes you take a picture and then when you edit this, you will find the shapes. But your brain, when you are taking pictures, might not notice it consciously, but unconsciously you will see these things and you will take a picture of. Especially if you train your eye to find shapes and forms. The creature I found here is like a fantasy creature. Here is the head, eye, nose, and there is a big ear here. Here is the neck, and there is a wing here, and maybe another wing in this side. It's a portrait of fantasy creature, but it doesn't have to be like a fantasy thing. It doesn't have to be abstract. It can be geometrical shapes, like this one. In this image, this piece of branch on the ground had some sort of shape. It's like a bended line. It's like an angle. And with this lichen here, they create also a line. As I said, they are looks like dots, but we don't see the dots. We see the line. So together they create an X shape or like a bow and arrow. And there are other lines around this in this image that they also create some more graphical elements. In this piece of ice, I found the shape very fascinating. I call this one @ because it reminds me of @ character or symbol. And I took the picture of this little puddle on the road when I was walking to a location. When I came back 1 hour later, this one was gone. Somebody stepped on it and broke the ice. I'm glad that I took image when I had the chance, when I saw it. So there is a clear shape in this piece of ice that I took a picture of. Sometimes the shapes can be a little bit more organic, like this. You can see some circles here and also some fluid lines in these images. Same here, you have circles and then fluid lines, and those organic lines connect these dots to these circles together. If you look closer to whatever it is in front of you, around you, you find very curious shapes and forms sometimes. Like this one, it's a frost formed on my window one morning in the winter, and it's catching the morning light. That's why it's a little bit golden here. I used the dark window of this house on the other side of the street to make a dark background for these shapes, and I took those images. In the edit, of course, I increased the contrast, cleaned up the image, removed all the dust on the window, and make it a little bit sharper. But tell me, what shapes do you see in these images? Now, if we zoom out a little bit and not going too deep, not into the macro or very close up scenes, you still will be able to find shapes and forms in a little bit bigger and wider angle of view. This is one example. I found this rock in the puddle. I found the shape very interesting. There are some shapes and forms in this image, especially this rock that is coming out of the water or puddle, and this is like a triangle shape. To me, it looks like a drone shot of a mountain or something, but with the snow white cap. Here is another example of what kind of shape you can find in rocks. Obviously, you can recognize this boomerang shape in the crack in this rock, and also this square shape on the side. This is one example of geometric shapes. Sometimes the shapes can be geometric, sometimes they can be organic shapes, and sometimes they can be actually abstract, like some of examples that I showed you. By looking closer, you might find things like this on the ground. When I was walking with my family in the city, I found this leaf standing between the wood on the ground. It's like a boat docked on the harbor. It has its own shape and character. Now go a little bit wider and look at a little bit bigger scenes and see what we can find in those scenes. Again, on the coastline, I took this image. What I saw here was this cross or plus shape here in these rocks. So it's a relatively big scene now. It's much bigger than the previous ones. So from here to the background rocks is like a few meters of distance. But the line here, it creates a plus shape, and it's like a flag, like Swedish flag, for instance. I have two colors, red colors on the two square on top, and gray colors in the two square on the bottom. Very cool. You can find shapes and forms in trees. Trees are a very cool subject to photograph. They can create many forms and shapes and characters. Here is one of them. I took this one in autumn, somewhere close to where I live. What I liked about this trunk was this form, like a hand in a cool shape with fingers, and it was, of course, the colors are very nice and beautiful in this image. They have some sort of complementary colors with the greenish tones on the bark and the orangish colors on of the leaves. But if I was zooming out a little bit to take this picture, I would see more of the trunk and other stuff around it, and this interesting shape would be lost. So it's very important to recognize the shape when you take a picture and try to compose based on that shape that you found interesting. Here is another example of finding shapes in trees. I have a vlog when I took this image. I put the link into the corner, but here what we see is two circles in these tree trunks or branches. So they create those circles and a dot in the middle. That's the shape I found interesting and tried to compose this image based on these shapes. It was a delicate composition. If I moved a little bit back, right and left, those branches would overlap very easily. And I had a very tight spot. Check that video out if you want to see how I took this image. This is also a scene with a little bit wider angle of view in this waterfall. What the form I found interesting in this photo, in this scene, was these two triangle shape on the sides of the waterfall. On both sides you see this triangle here and this triangle shape here, and the middle part is like a sand clock. Talking about the trees making characters, this is one example. How I see this tree. To me, this tree looks like a creature trying to attack, extended his arms, limbs to grab the prey. This is particularly very hard scene to photograph. I like this oak tree very much, but it's very difficult to take picture of this one because all of those shrubs and smaller branches around it, it's make it very difficult to photograph. That works in this particular moment because there were no leaves on those branches, and I could make them a bit less visible with the fog that I had in this moment. You can see how foggy it was. This tree is not too tall, maybe a couple of meters high. Already the top of the tree is in the fog. So very cool shape that you can find in characters you can find in trees. Sometimes you can find characters in different things as well. What do you see here? Do you see the character? Do you see the snowman in this photo? Can you recognize him? Sometimes you can create your own shapes. My son was asking me to take picture of him when he was playing with the sand. I asked him to draw the sand like this, and this image is my favorite because the sand looks like a bird in this image. Okay, so far it's nice. You might say, Hamed, that's cool. You found the small shapes in the small scenes. How about the bigger landscape images? How about finding shapes in the bigger scenes? We are getting to that part now. But before I go to vistas and find shapes in vistas, let me show you a couple of examples of landscape scenes and how you can recognize shapes in those bigger scenes. But then we'll go into vistas as well. In this image, the road and the wooden path is obviously a clear shape, right? But there are more shapes to the image that I like. The way I composed this image, the shape I was more interested in was this triangle shape made by foreground tree on the left corner. You can recognize this triangle with the orange leaves. And then there are other shapes in the background, and the grass on this side is also like a triangle as well. So to me, these are different shapes that like pieces of puzzles that fit together to create an image. Here is again another example when you can recognize shapes and lines. I recognize these two fallen trees in the background, and I try to put this tree that has like a triangle shape in the middle between these two diagonals. This one is a little bit different, and I really like to show you this image because I have my personal touch in this image. So this is how you can recognize shapes and forms in the landscape, and you can develop your own eyes, but this is what I saw. I saw a scene. I didn't see the small branches as details, as distractions. I found them as a context for the main subject, which is the tree trunk in the middle of those small branches. When I was preparing for this video, I've noticed something in this image that is actually making it more personal for me. I used to paint watercolor paintings. My art signature was like this. And the form of this tree, it looks like my art signature. So it's a very personal image and I like it even more. Sometimes you can make the scene simpler by making arrangement and creating shapes in the image, like this one. Of course, it was a big landscape, but when I zoomed in to this part, I created an order. I have a triangle here on this side, on the right side, and then I have another triangle on the left side. Then there is another one behind it, and many different lines that they cross each other. Same for this scene. You can recognize the triangles and shapes on the ground and the field, and also the shape of the forest in the background. This image is also all about the shapes. Light help here as well, but the image itself is all about lines and forms and shapes. By the way, we liked diagonals and shapes that have a little bit more dynamic rather than horizontals and vertical lines in the images, because verticals and horizontals are a little bit more stable, but diagonals have more dynamics, more motion and more energy. So especially triangles, they have a little bit of tendency of action, movement and showing directions. Sometimes taking a picture of a scene, a beautiful scene, doesn't mean that you need to find shapes and forms, but even in those images, if you can arrange some shapes and forms and make them work together, then the image becomes a little bit more interesting to look at. In this example, the form of the tunnel, it's one form that is very interesting and main subject of this photo, this waterfall and the tunnel. But we also, if you notice, we have a triangle on the side, on the left side, that points towards the tunnel, and we have another shape, a little bit more a triangle or a square shape here on the right side as well. But also this line and form in the water, it's S-curve shape or C-curve shape that in the water, and these small branches of these little the tree here that are pointing towards the main subject of the photo. They are helping to complement the image and make the image a little bit more interesting. As you can see, now we are going back a little bit. We are taking wider and wider images and we are trying to find shapes and forms in those bigger scenes. Sometimes it's very easy to find those forms and shapes, like in this image. In Lofoten, you can recognize the shape of the hut here. It's a very famous hut in Lofoten. Everyone who went there is a picture of this scene. What is interesting about this scene is that we have this shape here, this triangle shape or pointy shape of the house, which matches the pointy shape of the mountain behind it. By aligning these two together, you create nice, easy to look at and amazing photo. Now I'm gonna show you some bigger landscape vistas and show you the forms and shapes in bigger landscape. Mountains usually they have their own shapes and forms. This is a panorama from a mountain range and it's very symmetrical, this image. That's why it works. Because of the shape and because it is symmetrical. This mountain in Lofoten also has its own very defined shape, especially when it combined with the reflection on the wet sand here. Even though this image reflection is a little bit disturbed because we had a strong wind, but still we can recognize reflection and put them together. Our brain put these two shapes together. We see the symmetry, we see a diamond shape here with the mountain and the reflection, but beyond that there is another shape or form in this image which makes it even more interesting, and that's the X shape in this image. Can you find the X shape? This dark cloud here, and if you continue the line on the other side, you have this line in the sand. From the opposite side, you have the reflection of that line in the sand, and if you go continue up with this blue patch here, you can feel a line here as well. So these together, they create an X shape which converge in the middle of these dark stones in front of the mountain, and that actually adds extra layer of interest to this image. There is one thing that we might need to be a little bit more conscious about and make the forms that we want to make by using technical part of photography in our advantage, by using camera settings, by using timing when you take the photo. In this example in Faroe Islands, what I recognized was this cubic shape of this rock here sitting on this plateau. The only way I could show this form was to time where I pressed the shutter button when the water was coming into this plateau, filling up this part and retreating back to the ocean. With the longer shutter speed, I could make this part white and separate this form and shape from the dark bedding rocks. Then we have the foreground rocks that they also have their own pattern and lines and forms. It's a little bit more organic kind of pattern in contrast with the geometrical shape of this cubic stone here. Very cool scene. I made this black and white because this image is all about forms and shapes. This is an image I actually printed out and put it on the wall behind me. And here is the last example I wanted to show you. This is one of my favorite images of all time from Faroe Islands. What I liked in this image is the forms and shapes. This is the most important part of this image. If you squint your eyes and look at this image, you will see the land as a whole, as one shape, and the sky and water as another shape or another whole. So they are two forms that they are balancing each other. They look like yin and yang, symbol of balance, symbol of harmony. They take the same amount of space in this image. This white part taking the same amount of space as this dark part does. We also can find more shapes. If you break it down further more, you can recognize different shapes like this triangle on the cliffside here. In the background, you can create shapes of these rocks in the water. They look like crocodiles turned into a stone, and other type of forms and shapes, and this beautiful coastline create the sea curve towards the background. By the way, I have some of these images available as prints on my website. If you like to have them hang on your wall, head to my website and order these prints. So to recap, next time you go out to take pictures, try to find shapes and forms and try to make your composition based on that. Not just looking at the whole scene and take a snapshot of the scene in front of you. By changing your focal length to wider or zooming in, you can create some forms and shapes. In this example, with the wide angle and with the panorama, actually it's a panorama, I see an arc formed by the clouds above this island. So this is another form that you can use. This is one technique to create forms. Wide angle lenses, they create lines, and because of the distortion and how the wide angle works, you have more lines and shapes coming into the pointing towards the center of the image. Choosing different shutter speeds, especially if you work with the water, you can create some lines and forms in the water. Sometimes forms and shapes are obvious in the nature, like the rainbow or some leaves or stones. Sometimes those shapes and lines are a little bit more hidden and they are a little bit more abstract. This image of rain and rainbow. Now we recognize the shapes and forms. Let's go back to the images I showed in the beginning of the video. What do you see in this image? What I saw in this image was a circle. These are red dots around this image that create a window, a circle, or a portal for what it is in the middle of this image. I could compose this scene a million of different ways, but this is how I choose to do that. In this one, I recognize triangles. I see a lot of triangles on the ground, on these rocks. Also, this wave here looks like a triangle, and these triangles also point towards the lighthouse, which is the main subject of the scene. And this one is a little bit obvious. Of course, you see this line. It looks like a character belongs to Lord of the Rings universe. I hope you learned something new in this video, and by practicing recognizing shapes and lines in landscape, definitely you will improve your photography eye and you will improve your photography very quickly. If you like this video, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button and leave a comment. Tell me what kind of shapes and forms do you find in nature. Thank you so much. See you soon in the next video. Until then, take care. Bye.